Okay, we're up to Daf Mem Zayin of Aleph, top of the Amid. Amar Rava, Hanitarti Bui. If there are two blisters, the smichi lahadadi on the lungs that are very close to each other. Apparently, the way Rashi explains it, if there are two blisters on the lungs that are next to each other, there's a tradition that means that there's a hole. And that means that the hole scabbed over beneath one of these blisters. Apparently, one blister is not indicative of a hole. One blister could just be the mucus on top coated over to become a blister, but two blisters together, that's a hole. Therefore, less lubidikusa, you don't have to check. Meaning, in other words, there's no purpose of checking, because checking doesn't matter. Once there's a hole, as we saw last time, even if the hole scabs over, it's still treif. Once there's a hole, you're done. The only time maybe it's okay if you have sirchas next to each other, according to Rashi, but outside of that, if there's a hole, you're done. Two blisters is indicative of a hole, and therefore it's already a treifa. Now, says the Gemara, let's say you have one large blister and there's a little bit of an indentation in the middle. So it technically could be two blisters next to each other, or it could be one large one. So how do I tell? So here's what you do. So maisin and silu, you bring a thorn, ubatsinula, and you pierce one of the sides. If I don't want to get too graphic because it's early in the morning, but obviously blisters have some sort of pus or whatever it is. If you have one large one, but there's an indentation in the middle, so it could be two or it could be one. So poke one side. If the liquid, the entire thing drains out, it's obviously one. If only half of it drains out and the other half does not, then it's obviously two. Says the Gemara, okay, Amar Rava, another halacha. The pictures help, but basically on every lung, depending on how you're holding it, upside down or right side up, whatever. But the way it appears to us is if you're holding the trach and the esophagus up, which is obviously not the way animals, they don't stand like that. But the way, if you held it like this, there's 5 lobes on top. There's going to be 3 to your left and 2 to the right. That's a healthy animal. It has 5 lobes on top. Obviously, assuming the trachea and the esophagus are being held upright. Obviously, if they're the way a normally animal lies, then it's sort of downward. But there's still 5. It's just a matter of where it is. So the point is there should be 5 lobes on top, 3 to the left, 2 to the right. Says the Gemara, Amarava, Chamisha Uniis Lelereya. The lung has 5 lobes that are on top. Apa Klapi Gavra, when the animal's lying down, but when it's facing you, meaning if you were lying under the animal, or in other words, you hold the trachea and esophagus up, right? Because when you're lying, and animals are flat. So if you're lying under the animal's right in front of you, it's the same as holding the trachea and esophagus right side up, if you're holding it like this. So when you're holding it like this, it says the Gemara, Tlasim Yamina, V'tartim Ismala. There's going to be 3 lobes on the right of the animal and 2 lobes on the left. So there's 5 total. Says the Gemara, Chaser or Yatir, or Chalif Treifa. If you have an extra lobe, you're missing a lobe, or if the lobes are on the wrong side, Treifa. In other words, any deviation of the amount of lobes and all these zachin is a treifa. Is a treifa. So if there's too little, too much, or then it's a treifa. So says the Gemara. That's funny. That was just for me. I'll tell you after. That's funny. So anyway, there's too little or too much, then it's a treifa. Now that is Rava's shita. So according to Rava, let's focus on one point of this. If you have too many lobes, or it's missing a lobe, it's a treifa. That's Rava's statement. So says the Gemara the following story. There was a lung. Basically, you don't think of them as people. Meremar was the Rav of the town, and the Shaykhet brought the lungs of an animal to Meremar to check because it had too many lobes. It had an extra lobe, which Rava just said is a treifa. So Meremar they bring it to inspect, to Meremar to inspect. So Amar Le, now Yosef Rav Acha Abava, for whatever reason, Rav Acha is waiting outside, as you have sometimes big Rabbanim, right? There's a waiting room, right? So Meremar is inside, the Shaykhet goes in with the lungs. Rav Acha is outside, and he's by the door. So he says to the Shaykhet, Amar Le May Amarlach, when the Shaykhet leaves, he said, what did Meremar say about the lungs thing? So Amar Le Achshar Nala, he said it's kosher. Now, there's 2 options of why he said it's kosher. Either he held that too many lobes is okay, or he made a mistake. And Meremar didn't really inspect it well. So Rav Acha says to the Shaykhet, go back in. Check again. Meaning, maybe when you showed it to Meremar, he didn't notice the amount of lobes. Go back in, and...
Again, he says to Meremar that there's...
The Shaykhet shows it to Meremar. Meremar says it's kosher. Rav Acha is waiting outside, and Rav Acha sees that there's too many lobes. Rav Acha feels that it's treif. So Rav Acha says to the shochet, bring it back in. So he says, Hadar Ayla Kameh. So he goes in, Meremar doesn't even respond. Meremar says to the shochet, Amar lei, Zil Eimalaman de Ismabot. Tell the one who's outside, less Hilchas Kavasi de Rabbi says. We don't pass him like Rava. Meaning, I know there's an extra lobe. We don't pass him like Rava. We pass him that it's kosher. So go tell the person outside, meaning Meremar knew, you're coming in, go tell the person outside, we don't pass him like Rava. Like, I know what's going on. I saw there's an extra lobe. I know Rava says it's treif. I held that it's kosher. Okay. Says the Gemara the following, Hani mili de kaima b'daraduna. Now this helps if you have the pictures. The lobes are basically, the extra lobes are on the sides. It only is kosher if the extra lobe is where the other lobes are. So let's say on this side it's supposed to have 2, it has 3, but at least it's in a row. Then it's kosher. Aval beini, but let's say there's an extra lobe in the center. So again, think of your lungs are in front of you, there's lobes on either side. That is too much Gemara says, this concept of having an extra lobe that according to Meremar it's kosher is only when the extra lobe is where the other lobes are. But if let's say there's an extra lobe in the center, then it's treif. Now, what's interesting about this is all our animals have an extra lobe in the center. They even have a picture, it's called the small rose-like lobe. It's called the Inunusa de Varda. Apparently our animals have an extra lobe in the center. Maybe they always didn't, or maybe it was a different species or evolution that it evolved to have an extra one. Whatever it is, the point is, I don't think that's controversial. Maybe, who knows? The point is, says the Gemara, originally an extra lobe in the center was a treif. But says the Gemara, they brought in an animal to Rav Ashi that had an extra lobe in the center. So Rav Ashi originally wanted to say it was treif. Armele Rav Huna Mar Bar Avia. Rav Huna Bar Avia said, Kol hani chivi baraisa ha'chiesle. All rural animals have this, meaning, while you think that it's a treifa, maybe it was, but now all the animals have this. Once all the animals have this, then it's not a treifa anymore. That's the way animals that are healthy. It's not a defect. That's what it's supposed to be. The karle tavchi, and all the butchers call this inunisa devarda, the small rose-like lobe. So therefore, it's not treifa anymore. But says the Gemara, hani mili gavoy, this small rose-like lobe is not a treifa if it's in the proper spot, which is basically when the animal's lying down, when the animal's like this, it's facing the ground. That's where it should be. But if it's on the other side, so it's in the same location, but on 180 degrees on the other side, it's not supposed to be there by any animals. Meaning, even in the normal way that it developed nowadays, it has to be in the location that it normally is. Go to the next page. It says the Gemara, Aval gavo, afilu k'treifa das treifa. But when it comes to, if it's on the other side, then even if it's smaller, it's a treifa. Meaning, it has to be that the extra lobe is where it's supposed to be, where it's meant to be. Okay. Amar Afram, Hayria de damya leufta treifa. If you have a lung that is like a piece of wood, it's a treifa. Now, what does it mean like it's a piece of wood? In what capacity is it like a piece of wood? So says the Gemara, ikdami bechazusa. Some say it means that in appearance, if the lung looks like wood, as I'll explain in a moment what this means, if the lung looks like a piece of wood, it's treif. And ikdami begishta, and some say it means in texture. If the lung feels like wood, it's treif. Now, what does this mean to look like wood or to feel like wood? So ikdami benaficha. The first opinion that says that it looks like wood, it means that it's bloated and turns whitish. Like if it looks like sometimes you'll see in the water like wood floating in the water, not wood like from the forest, but wood that's floating in the water is like whitish. That type of wood that's floating, that's a problem. If the lung looks like wood, it's the wrong color. It's a whitish, brownish color. That's treif. And ikadami de pchiza, and some say no, that when it means like wood, it means texture. What does it mean? It's hard. If the lung is hard like wood, that's a treifa. And ikadami de shia de lesli chutucha de avni. Or what if some say it means like this? A piece of wood is like it's like smooth. What if you have a lungs that the lobes are not separated? Instead of it being shaped like lobes, it's just like a smooth hunk of flesh, like a rib roast. That's a problem. Okay. Amar Rava says. Now, the one thing to remember before we continue, discoloration is a treifa if it means the animal will die. Treifa, again, means the animal has an ailment that is life-threatening. If it has a discoloration, but the doctors would say if the animal was brought to it before it was shechted, it'll be fine, then it's not a treifa. Obviously, the animal's dead, so it's dead, so it's not going to survive the being dead part. But if the question is, if they were to bring this lungs to the doctor when the animal was alive, what would the doctor say? That's what you're majorly trying to figure out with the discoloration. Says the Gemara, Amarava, kechuchla kshera. If it's blue, a bright blue, that's kosher. Apparently, it could survive that. Okay, but kichidiyuta, but if it's like a dark blue, like dry ink, which is like a borderline purple, that's treifa. Dam Rav Chanina, Shachar Adam hu ela shalaka. Because Rav Chanina used to say that it's really, that a blackish color is really red that became ill. In other words, this is a sign of an infection. If it's that color, that means it's a sign of internal bleeding and an infection, and the animal is going to die. Okay? Now, Yeruka, what about the animal is greenish? Kshera. Now, how do I know it's kosher? So the Gemara has the following Maisa. I'll just say outside the Maisa, basically you had a kid who was too green. And Rav Nassan said, don't do the bris milah yet, wait. And the kid will be fine. I don't know if it's Billy Reuben, I guess it was, they call it greenish. But the point is the kid was too green, and Rabbi Nassan said, wait. And the kid got better. So you see that greenish can heal. That's the way you know that green color can heal in a lungs is because a baby that was green healed. Says the Gemara, that's how I know green is in healing. And aduma, also bright red, also can heal because there was another Maisa of Rabbi Nassan where a baby was bright red and he said wait, and the baby healed. So 2 cases of a baby healing, one red and one green, indicates that red and green is a healing type of color. Meaning, in other words, it's a temporary ailment and it's not long term. The Gemara says, what are these stories? The Tanya of Nasan Omer. I once traveled to a city overseas. And a woman came to me. This woman had a baby, did a bris milah, the baby died. Had another baby, did a bris milah, the baby died. So they had 2 babies and the baby died, and now it's the 3rd child. So she didn't know what to do. She didn't want to obviously do the bris milah again. On the other hand, if the baby is capable of having a bris milah, you have to do a bris milah. So shlishi avilafanai. So she brought this 3rd son to Rabbi Nassan. Re'isiv shaya Adam. Rabbi Nassan said, I saw the baby was very red. So amarti los, I told the woman, biti hamtina la chivlas damai. Don't do the bris milah now, because if you do the bris milah now, apparently the body is not absorbing the red blood cells well. And if you do the bris milah now, the baby could die. So here's what you do. Wait. Let the body naturally heal itself, get the right color, and then do the bris milah. That's what they did. The kid survived. And they called the baby Nasan Habavli after Rabbi Nassan's advice. It's a raya, Svardim, they name after the living. So they named Rabbi Nasan Habavli after me. That was where the baby was red, by the way. So when it comes to lungs, you see that red can heal. Similarly, green. The Gemara says, "Shuv pamachas halachti medinas Kaputkia." I went to the city of Kaputkia. Basa isha lafane. A woman came in front of me. Shemala ben Arisha and Meis Misham ben Meis. She had 2 babies. Did bris milah by both. They both died. Same story, but instead of the baby being red, this time the baby is green, which is, by the way, the opposite. It means that the baby does not have enough blood. It's not absorbing the blood properly. It's not too much blood. It's too little red blood cells. So it says the Gemara, Shlisha v'lefanarisi shayarik. I saw it was greenish. Haitzati boy v'lohei by dambris. I looked at the baby and I said, this baby will not bleed enough. In other words, this baby is too weak. If you do the bris milah, the baby's not going to bleed enough, first of all, to be out to the bris milah, but also the baby is not going to survive this. And therefore, wait until the body absorbs the blood better. They waited, the baby survived, and they also named the baby Nasan Habavli after me. If the lung looks like liver, it's kosher. Meaning liver is very, very bright red. Bright red is kosher. Kibisra, but if it looks like ordinary meat, it's treif. If you ever go, by the way, if you look at lungs, it's a pinkish red, as opposed to meat, which is more of a reddish red. Apparently, the color of regular steak on a lungs, no good. It's a sign of a treifa. V'simanech u'basar basada treifa. And the way to remember it is basar basada treifa. If it looks like basar, then it's a treifa. Okay. Rav Sama Breda Rava, Hayreya de Damya Kikvusha Kumurika. If it has the same color as a steak. Lungs don't look like a steak. That's the one thing. You look at I tell you, the Oyu Torah, they have this Chassidish guy who's cutting up meat all day long. He's cutting up a cow. And lungs are pinkish. They're much pinker. They're not a steak color. If it looks like a steak, it's a problem. Says the Gemara, if you have hayriya dedamya kikvusha kumerika kagaybiyosa trefa, if you have lungs that look like saffron or like a yolk, it's a trefa. Meaning yellow is no good. We said before green is okay, but not yellow. Always in the Gemara, green and yellow are very, very close to each other. So it says the Gemara, if yellow is no good and green is okay, what's the type of green that's okay? Kikarti, green like a leek. Leek green is okay. Amar Ravina. Ravina said, Otum Bereya. Okay, basically like this. You have a lung that you're blowing up, and one of the sides of the lung is not expanding. Now, it could not be expanding because, it could be not expanding because it has a disease in it, a diseased lung tissue, so it's not opening up, which would be a sign of a treifa. Or it could just be that there was some mucus that got in that's just holding it tight. In other words, so there's a part of it not blowing up. So how do you do this? Now, if you take a knife and just pop that area, go into the area that's clogged and just open it, it'll open, obviously. But then that's not going to tell you, that's not going to show you whether it's diseased or not, or whether it just has pus. You want to know if there's pus there. If there's pus there, then that's why it's sealed off. But if there's no pus there and it's still closed off, that means that there's a disease of the lung tissue. So here's what you do. You cut on top of it and see if pus comes out. Okay, says the Gemara. I'm sorry. You bring a knife and cut open on top of that area that's clogged. If pus comes out, then it means that it was sealed because of the pus, and then it's fine. But if there's no pus that comes out, then that could be a sign of a diseased lung. So what do? Put a feather or some spittle and blow up the lung. If it bubbles, that means some air is coming out. Maybe not a lot of air, but enough air that it shows that there's no diseased tissue. But if there's no air coming out, then that's a treifa. Now, Amr of Yosef, Krum Sha'olam Machas Makabre and a Krum. This next two teachings we had, I think, yesterday, so I'll do them fairly quickly. If for some reason the Gemara repeats it. The Gemara says that if a lung has a scab, that's treifa, because that means that there was a hole that scabbed over. And then Rav Yosef says, Hayreya Da'avsha. If you hear hissing sound from the lungs, I'll say this very quickly, as we said yesterday, if the hissing sound, again, Rav Yosef Shita is that if the inner membrane is punctured, but the outer membrane is intact, it's kosher. So there could be hissing sound air going from the inner membrane up to the outer membrane, but the outer membrane is sealed. That's fine. Or the hissing sound is there's a hole through and through and it's a treifa. So how do you tell if there's a hissing sound and air is actually escaping it? So says the Gemara, if you know where the hole is, then put a little spittle or a feather or straw on that area and blow up the lungs. If it bubbles or moves, that means that the hole is through and through and there's air escaping, and then it's a treifa. And if there's no air escaping, then it's kosher. What's the hissing sound? The hissing sound is the puncture between the lower membrane and the upper membrane. And says the Gemara, and if you don't know where the hole is, so then you take the entire lungs, put it into a bucket of water. Warm water, not hot water, because that constricts. Not cold water, because that hardens. The Goldilocks, perfectly warm water, and then you blow it up. It says the Gemara, you can't put in hot water because that shrivels it. Not cold water because that stiffens it. But you put it into lukewarm water. If there's bubbles, that's a sign that it's a treifa, because there's a puncture. But if there's no bubbles, that's kosher. Why? Because that just means that there was a puncture between the lower membrane and the upper membrane. And the hissing that you're hearing is the air going from the lower membrane to the upper membrane. Says the Gemara, Amar Ulam Rav Yechanan, Reya shenish b'cha kekita ksheira. If, let's say, a lungs pours like a water, what that means is like this: the outside of the lungs is intact, but the entire inner tissue of the lungs has dissolved. I would assume that's no good. I would assume that that's not a healthy way to live your life, that there's something wrong with the animal. But says Ula, I don't care about the inside, I care about the outside. As long as the outside looks good, you're good to go. Very interesting. Because again, by the way, I would not be shy. It's Rav Yechanan talking. Interesting. Okay, that's if you want to get in a Chassidish Avart about Rav Yechanan's outlook in life. The externals matter. It's very interesting. It's time for now. Alma kasava chisar mebefnim leishmei chisaron. Rav Yechanan feels that inner deficiencies is not a problem. As long as the outside looks good, the inner will fix itself. The inner will work itself out. Interesting. It's like the Chevron Galus Adam, right? As long as you look the part, the other parts will sabak. I think that you look the parts, and the inners will follow. Interesting. So it says the Gemara, Eisvir of Abba Le'ula. So you're telling me that inner problems of the lung is not an issue as long as the outside is intact. Here's the problem. Look at this brisa. The brisa says, Hareya shenikva, if the lung has a puncture. Now I know what a puncture is. Puncture is through and through. Oishe chasra, or it's missing something. Now stop. What does it mean missing something? So the Gemara assumes that a puncture is through and through. Missing something means something from the inside is missing. So you see that an inner deficiency is a problem. Says the Gemara, my chasra, what does it mean chasra? If chasra means the outside is missing, why do you have to tell me that? If a puncture, by the way, again, the chasra means like a hole punch. I mentioned this last time. A puncture is where you take a pen, go through a paper, right? Punctures it. A chasra is where you have a hole puncher and there's a little piece that is removed. So there's a difference. So it says the Gemara, if a puncture is a treifa, kal v'chaimer missing the actual flesh, it's of course a treifa. So it must be chasra is a different case. What's chasra? Inside. That the outside is complete, but the inside is missing. So you see that an inner deficiency is a treifa. Says the Gemara, Hainu nikva, elav mibafnim, v'shema mina chisim b'fnim shmei chasaron. So the Gemara says no. Really, an inner deficiency is not a treifa. So what's the case of chasra? I'll tell you. The Gemara says, La'oila mibachutz. Really, chasra is outside. So you'll say, wait a minute. Then what's the difference between nikva and chasra? As long as there's a hole, you got yourself a problem. What does it matter whether you're deficient, not deficient? I'll tell you the difference. Really, an inner problem is nothing. It's kosher. I don't care as long what goes on the inside. As long as it looks good, you're fine. So what's chasra? The ka'amr tainu nikva, leitzricha el Rav Shimon. Damar ad shetinakav lebeis hasfunais. Hani mili nekev d'lesbei chisaron. I'll tell you, if you remember this, Rav Shimon's sheet is, basically the lungs have these things called bronchi. Bronchi, they look like veins. They're white veins that go through the lungs. They're basically what actually, the air, they're what travels, that allows the air to travel. They're the highways for the air. The rest of the lungs are basically just spongy tissue. But those bronchi are the actual highways for the lungs, for the air. Rav Shimon's shita is that a puncture is not a treifa unless it hits one of those highways. That's a shita. So if you have a puncture but it doesn't hit one of those bronchi, you're fine. So says the Gemara, I'll tell you now the var, it's very simple. A chisar mibefneim is nothing. Missing inside is nothing. So what's the two cases of nikva and chisaron? I'll tell you. Nikva means that it's punctures, it has to puncture the bronchi. Chisaron, you're actually missing tissue, like a hole punch, missing some of the lung tissue. That's a treif even if it doesn't hit the bronchi. So really, chisar mibefnim is lo shmei chisaron. Really, inside deficiencies is irrelevant. So what are the two cases of nikva and chisaron? Nikva means that it punctures, it has to puncture the bronchi. Chisaron is anything that's missing of the lung itself, is a treifa even if it doesn't touch the bronchi. Just to finish up the daf, Rav Chanina cholash, Rav Chanina got ill. All the Gaber of Nasan Michal Gadeli Adar, so Rabbi Nasan and all the Rabbanim went to visit him. Aisu, while they were visiting him, maybe Gavin, this has a little bit with your conversation before, like when a gadol is sick and what the meaning behind it. But Pashup Shat, while they were visiting him, a shaila came up. Aisu Kame Reya Shenishbecha Kakitai. They brought a liver that was missing, that the outside was perfect, but the inside was missing. V'achshrei, and he says it's kosher. Okay. Amar Rava, but Rava says, this whole thing that the inside could be deficient and it's still kosher, the kaimi sfunois, the bronchi have to be intact. Meaning, I told you, the bronchi are the white highways, the white veins that carry the air. The rest are just spongy tissue. You want some spongy tissue to dissolve inside, that's fine, but the bronchi have to be intact. If some of the bronchi dissolve, that's a problem. Now let me ask you a question. I got a lung that's shaking like a water bottle, and it's something spilling out. How am I supposed to know if a bronchi is part of the dissolved matter, if a non-bronchi? So it says the Gemara, I'll tell you very simple. Take a black bowl, pour the contents inside. If you see white, that's dissolved bronchi. If you don't see white, there is no bronchi. It says the Gemara, how do you know if the bronchi is dissolved or not? So it says the Gemara, bring a glazed earthenware basin, black basin, pour the contents of the lung inside of it. If you see white, that's treifa. That means that the bronchi that dissolved, that's a treifa. Just to finish up the daf, Amar Rabbi Nachman, Reya shenimuka ukrum shalok kayim ksheira. Rabbi Nachman does not agree with what we said before. He says if the entire thing is dissolved inside, then it's no good. But If you have a lung that's externally perfect and internally just has some decay, a little decay, not mamish, dissolve, a little decay, that's kosher. Tanya mihachi, the Brisa similarly states, reya shenimuko krum shalakayim, if you have a lung that's intact on the outside and on the inside it just has slight decay, it's kosher. Afilu machzekas revius, even if the decay is the size of enough liquid to hold a revius, so let's say a cup, you can fit a cup in the decay part, but that's fine. That's still fine. Kshera, just to finish up the brisa, the rest of the brisa is not relevant, but it's a brisa, so we'll just quote it. Nitla shlifuchis, if an animal's womb is missing, kshera, that's also kosher. Hitliya kaved shala, if an animal has a liver that became wormy, so that's also kosher. How do I know this? Zahayamaisa. V'alu aleh b'nei Asya shalosh regalim liyavna, the people of Asia, when they were oil regel, they went to the Sanhedrin the first Yom Tov. They went Sukkot, they asked the Shailas, but Sanhedrin refused to answer. They went Pesach, Sanhedrin refused to answer. They went Shavuos, the third Yom Tov, l'regel shlishi hitir lehem. Sanhedrin finally, I guess, felt comfortable answering the Shaila. They got the answer after 3 regalim that a wormy liver is kosher. I don't know why it took them 3 regalim, but that's the Maisa. I will stop here. Asia, it says Asiya, it's Asia, I guess.
Because they were in Yom.